Okay, so now we're going to talk about a little bit more detail of the causes. So, what you see here is a map of the United States, and it's broken into three colors. In the south is the red, which is the slave states. The north is the dark green, which is the free states. And then there's the light green, which is territories. Um, so, we're going to continue talking about the abolitionists because they're such a big group and there's a lot going on with them. Um, for starters, a woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a novel called Uncle Tom's Cabin. And a lot of people in the North, and especially women, they didn't really know how bad slavery was. Like, they heard about it and, like, theoretically it was bad, but they didn't really have, like, a personal connection to it. So once they read Uncle Tom's Cabin, they were like, oh my God, like, it's really terrible because it's from the perspective and the viewpoints of a slave and their life. And so they could see like how bad it was and how they were treated. And so that caused a lot more people to join the abolitionist cause. Also, and in the North, slavery wasn't allowed, and so there was a slave named Dred Scott, and him and his owner moved to the North. So Dred Scott figured that he should be free because they were in a free state. So he took his case and he sued his owner for his freedom. However, the Supreme Court said that because he was a slave, he wasn't a citizen, he wasn't even a person, he was just property. So he didn't have the right to sue at all. So that was like pretty crazy, right? And then there was also John Brown. He led a raid on a place called Harper's Ferry. So Harper's Ferry was a place where the government kept their weapons, called an arsenal. And so he went to steal the weapons from the arsenal. And he figured that if he could give the slaves these weapons, it would cause an uprising and they would all fight for their freedom. But it didn't really work out. They didn't really fight for him. And he ended up getting captured and then he was executed. So, because of all of this stuff going on, like the government is aware that there's a lot of tensions, and so they're trying to come up with these compromises. And so we've learned about some other compromises in United States history and how it's just kind of a band aid, like it doesn't really solve the problem. So now we have some more compromises. There's the Missouri Compromise of 1820, basically saying like Missouri is going to be a slave state, and to balance it out, Maine is going to become a free state. And then there's a line drawn. It's called the 3630 line. And you'll see it in the map. It's that red line where it says Indian Territory. And basically, there can't be any more slave states above that line. But it doesn't make sense because Missouri is above that line. But whatever. Another compromise is the Compromise of 1850. And basically what happens there is California enters as a free state, and then it lets Utah and New Mexico decide on their own if they want to be free states or slave states. So it gives them popular sovereignty, which is, them being able to vote. However, a controversial part of the Compromise of 1850 is the Fugitive Slave Act. So the Fugitive Slave Act basically says that if a slave runs away to the north, that they have to be returned back to the south, back to their owner. So there were people that were slave catchers and they were going up to the north and they were like kidnapping people that weren't even slaves, but they were African black. And so they were bringing them back down to the south and imprisoning them. And then anybody that was helping the freed slaves, then they were considered criminals and they had law things against them, action taken against them. And then another part of that popular sovereignty is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So that was letting them decide if they wanted to become slave states or free states. And there were so many people who were so passionate about the issue that they were going and they were fighting each other over it. So they call it Bleeding Kansas, where people were fighting and killing each other over that issue. So those are the main compromises that didn't really help anything, really, right? Like, we're still going towards the Civil War. And then the last, straw that broke the camel's back is the election of 1860. So that's when Abraham Lincoln wins the election. He becomes the president. And the South is so concerned that he's going to stop slavery that they decide that they're going to secede. So South Carolina is the first state to secede. They're just like, we're out. So that's basically that. And Abraham Lincoln thinks that it's against the law for them to secede, so now he's going to have to deal with it. And to be honest, like, they don't think it's going to become as big of a thing as it really does become, which we're going to learn about shortly.